of DefCamp 2017, but definitely not the last. We're looking at discussing cybersecurity in the real business world, and I think that April's presentation really set the context for that. So we're going to continue to dive into the topic. We have more than a handful of specialists whose job is to keep businesses safe and at the same time keep them lean enough so they can evolve and grow quite fast. So I'd like to invite on stage Cristiano Octavian Goicianu, Executive Director at the Business Security and Continuity Management Department at Becere, Adriana Radu, Partner at Schoner Attorneys at Law, Gabriel Mihaitanase, Cyber and IT Advisory Director at KPMG Romania, Gerald Dinka, Unica IT Security Officer, Gernot Golach, the Austrian Federal Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution and the Fight Against Terrorism. And our moderator today will be Gerd Bommer, the head of the commercial section of the Austrian Embassy in Bucharest. Gentlemen and lady, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. We're here today to talk about the business channel. We heard that DefCamp is mainly technical. We're talking basically about technical stuff, hacking, what happens in this world, and cyber security, IT security. And me coming from a business background, and you all coming from a business background, we actually are confronted with the challenges of today. And the challenges of today are cyber attacks, where a cyber attack in general costs you in between 80,000 and 500,000 euros. So that's the average amount that you have to spend for a cyber attack, in terms of damages that you have afterwards, or what you have to do in orders of remedies. How does it get better? So it's a topic that comes up with everyone, and it's a topic that is widespread. Why is it widespread? Everybody here in the room knows about WannaCry. WannaCry hit 150 countries in this world, and we talk about 195 countries that are all over the world. 150 countries have been hit by WannaCry. So it's a topic that touches all of us, and a topic that changes also legislation, national level, the European Union level. And we have looked into the facts a bit in the background. Talking about the facts, in Austria, 3/4 of all the companies in Austria have been victims of cyber attacks in the year 2016 alone. So within 1 year, 3 out of 4 companies have been victims of cyber attacks. We see in Romania that about 40% of the cyberspace was attacked last year. So also there, an enormous number. It's a problem that every company has, more or less. If you have not been attacked, it's not a question of if you're going to be attacked, it's just a question of when are you going to be attacked. The CERT always gives out trends. In Romania, we talk about positive trends in cybersecurity, but it's going to intensify. We're going to have loads more problems. We say that our KPMG, and we have Gabriel Tanasi here with KPMG, thanks very much for being with us. KPMG says that the companies simply know too little about cyber threat intelligence, which means the prevention of cyber attacks. KPMG also says that 2/3 of all the CEOs in Austria still see cybersecurity as a technical issue. It's exactly what we have been talking here in DefCamp. This is the 8th edition of DefCamp. The first 7 editions were mainly focusing on technical issues. So that's also the idea that Austrian CEOs have. Nowadays, this is not a correct view anymore, a correct perception of it, but it's completely different. In Romania, more than half of companies do not have an attention on cybersecurity as a major issue in the management level. So that's the basic facts. We will talk about the company's view on company's perspective on cybersecurity, and we will talk a bit about the European solutions. But opening up, I would like to start with Mr. Goicianu. Would be interesting, you also got a microphone behind you. Would be interesting to hear your view on whether you think that companies, and it includes your own company, but as a general question, are companies ready for the challenges? Are companies prepared for cyber attacks nowadays?
I will start it very diplomatic, I would say, in this world. So in security, you cannot be really ready in nowadays. So as I also actually had how it was also presented yesterday, in security is not a matter if, it's just a matter when. So from this point of view, to say that you are ready, it's something that it might be today, but definitely not tomorrow. So ready, what should I say? In financials, maybe we are a little bit more fortunate because we are strictly regulated and we see security as a must. Because basically what we are doing, we are selling security to our customers. And also from this point of view, we are opening to our customers via different type of business models, mobile, internet banking, the regular or the old type of branch are more or less disappearing from today's world. So therefore, we move towards a business which includes security by default. So we are somehow, financially speaking, much more closer to GDPR because we saw security by default from the beginning. So we need to see it by default because otherwise we cannot survive.
So banks are in finance industry is especially exposed to cyber threats. If we come to Unica Insurance, or let's say BCR is a subsidiary of an Austrian company, actually it's Erste Bank, a subsidiary of Erste Bank. Unica is also a subsidiary. If we talk about Unica, do you feel fully prepared? Do you think that your company is completely prepared for what's coming up here?
If I'm allowed to start with a joke, if you ask this question to my CFO, which is in charge of the budget, he will definitely say that we are more than prepared because security means a lot of budget. From my perspective, we are ready, and if we are not ready at the moment, we will never be ever, due to the fact that we paid a lot of attention in this area in the last 1 year, as I said. And what means actually security? Security means, in my opinion, a very good combination between security tools, security knowledge and skills from people, and a little bit of luck. If you have this combination perfectly in one single, let's say, portion, I rather prefer to say that we are prepared for that. But obviously, as Christian already said something, we are in front of our customer. We sell products to our customer, and so we are presenting some kind of services. But together with this product or this service, we are selling also some security part in that particular product. And it's not so clear. It's not so clear for the moment if it's enough security in that particular product. And we only have to sit and think in the future what can be done in order to remain in the safe side as we have to be for our customers.
Since when does an insurance company like yours focus on cyber security? When did IT security really become a management topic?
I have to be honest with you, I think that there are 2 years ago when this idea with IT security within the IT department starts in Unica, and with a little help from the local legislation, this idea came up and became a very good project. IT security is well defined now and is part of every let's say business process for the moment.
Yeah. So you talked about the legislative background. Maybe we can turn the opening round to Adriana Rado from Schönherr Law Office. Is also a subsidiary, so to say, of an Austrian law office, Schönherr. The legal basis, so to say, do you think it is already prepared, or is the legal basis only coming up in the near future?
I think part of it is prepared because it's there. We have this GDPR regulation that it has been adopted. It's a matter of time to come into force. But then there's a lot of other legislation that is currently under debate, and we don't know when it will be enforced. Probably, we hope that it will be earlier rather than sooner, so that companies have time to prepare. But there's still a lot to come in terms of legislation.
Yeah. If we talk about the companies again, the preparedness of companies, are they ready for it? If we talk to Gabriel Tanassa from KPMG, Gabriel, you have a broad view on it. You are more or less building up the IT security advisory of KPMG Romania, and you have a lot of clients, different clients from different sectors, industries. How do you see the preparedness of companies for the topic of IT security nowadays?
So, if we speak about management implication in IT security, I think in Romania there is a lot of improvement. There was a study recently done just looking over the annual reports published on listed companies all around the world, and in Romania only 2% had any kind of mentioning cybersecurity or security projects they are doing in their companies, in the annual reports. Even if they are financial type of reports, so that is a very good opportunity to speak about this and to demonstrate that you have a maturity in this area and you do something about it. But in Romania only 2% had this. So this in terms of management involvement. In terms of technical aspect of security, we saw that there are different levels of maturity across the industries and the companies. Clearly, financial industry is the most mature, and this is probably coming from what my colleagues here already mentioned, regulation, and then the type of business they are doing. But also there are other industries which are starting to gain on this area, and one of these is even traditional retail, for example. Okay, we speak about online, and that is a must to include security. But even on traditional, we see improvements. Of course, this is mainly related to big companies. When we go to the middle and small companies, and if they are not technology type of companies where they include security in their daily business, things are not going too well.
Gabriel, what do you think, what actually sparks the interest into IT security? Is it the attacks that the companies and the management thinks about the attacks? Is it actually an advisory package that you build up where you say, for the companies, we can do this and that, we can bring those services, and you talk to your clients that you more or less have from your tax and management consulting advisory? Or is it something else that sparks the interest into IT security?
I think the best spark for Romania in the last period was the regulatory part, because many companies started to focus on security starting from the first regulatory requirements, and they, let's say that in Romania, au prins gustul, had the taste, yes, because they did few projects, they saw that things are not going necessarily too well, and starting to do more and more complex things, even if they were not required to. So probably the spark was a regulatory one. For other sparks were coming from group levels, or companies which are part of group, where maturity from group level also was pushed to local companies. So actually it's a mix. It's a mix.
So what would you say is more or less companies have to be forced into doing something about IT security? Gernot Golub from the Austrian Ministry of Interior. I guess I'll have to introduce you a bit and why you're here with us on the panel. You're with the Cybersecurity Center in Austria. It's part of the Austrian Ministry of Interior. So you are more or less responsible for cybersecurity, IT security on a national level, and you cooperate with companies. Would you confirm what Gabriel said, that companies have to be more or less forced into the topic?
Definitely. I'm coming from a state office, so you will never get a clear yes or no from my side. It depends. I think it very much depends on what kind of attacks are we talking about. Is it classic cybercrime? Is it nation-state adversaries? Are companies ready to cope with that? And it depends, and I'm following up on my speaker on the panel here, and it really depends on the industry sector. Stuff some industry sectors are doing is like Star Trek science fiction for other industry sectors. So it really depends on what are you looking at, so it's very hard to answer the question.
When you talk about the sectors, can I just interrupt you for a moment? Do you talk about sectors that are more exposed, more prone to attacks?
No, I think there are, when we talk about critical infrastructure sectors, finance, energy, transport, water, and so on, they are all exposed to those kind of attacks. So there is not anymore this, it's only the finance industry, which gets hit. I think all sectors are prone to attacks, and I will not tell you now which sectors are very good and are very bad unless you switch off the cameras. I might get some problems back home.
You might spread some ideas in here.
I think a lot of the people sitting here can think about those, but there's a big difference at which industry sector you're looking at, and also in combination on which kind of attacks you're looking at. So it's very hard to answer the question if companies are ready for that, or if they're not ready for that. But I think when it comes to forcing companies to do something, we will, I think, for sure talk about legislation, which is coming up next year. My point of view, or our point of view, is that it's far more better to cooperate than to force. In the end, this might be necessary to force specific companies to do something, but the best thing would be to cooperate and to raise security for the industry, for the state itself, that way.
Yeah. If we say we force companies into doing something about IT security, what is the current status of IT security? If we look into banking, for instance, what are the threats that are coming up for you? What are the threats that you draw the most attention from an IT security point of view?
Okay, coming back to finance, because whatever we do, we are coming back to finance, and whoever attacks banks first, because it's much easier to get the reward. I would say that most probably, as compared to other industry sectors, finance have a broad view and also a complex view in IT security. And also from this perspective, yes, I would say yes, we as an industry, we have a focus on IT security and on IT security measures to prevent the actual threats. And speaking from my own perspective, from DCR perspective, last year we had a lot of DOS attacks, a lot. We just increased it exponentially. We raised it up to, if I remember correctly, 53, which is basically starting 2 years ago with almost 0 in 2 years' time, 53 above 10 gigs, it's much. And also this year, the star of the floor is the malware. So we have a lot of new malwares stopped by our systems, and we see that one of the entrance vectors is the email. So a lot of threats are coming via emails, via the entry points of each and every institution.
Yeah. If we talk to Gabriel, because you got the advisory from KPMG in the topic of IT security, what would you say? What are the threats that are right now the ones that the companies work the most with, they're the most prone to? What is it right now in terms of current IT security landscape?
Yes, malware is clearly the star of last period, but also there were quite a few important events in terms of data exfiltration and data exposure. And recently, Yahoo announced that actually pretty much every account was compromised, and not a limited number like they mentioned in the past. Equifax compromising a large number of probably half of the population of US, putting all the information in public in the internet. So malware, and then also this public personal data. So, and I think that this personal data will somehow be on a growth area, because with GDPR coming, people will try more and more to see what is happening there and try to see what can be done and what can be performed in this area.
All right, if we talk about the attacks that are happening right now, where do the attacks come from? Gernot Golok, you're on the state level. I don't know if the companies analyze where attacks actually come from, but we talk about 2 levels. We talk about the layer of geography, which countries are the ones that where the most attacks come from. And the second one is a really interesting discussion. So who does actually do the attacks? Is it the states? Is it secret services? Is it rather script kiddies that just buy the software online or the codes online? Who is it actually? Your competition, maybe?
So attribution, the whole topic with attribution is always very hard, because everyone, if an attack occurs, everyone wants to see a map and a red pinpoint on that. So that would be like the best thing to do for a lot of people to have, but that's very hard. And you see that also in the media, very often attribution is done way too fast. So if you hear, I don't know, some denial of service attack on some company in Austria, for example, and 5 minutes later you read that it's from Russia, for example. That's way too fast for the complexity of those kind of attacks, and also attackers try to give false flags, for example. If you look, for example, at the compile time of malware today, a lot of those were compiled at the Russian standard time. It doesn't mean that they're all from Russia, for example. So that's really hard to attribute on a geographic kind of level. Very often you can connect this with some kind of announcements on social media or with other information, then you might be able to pinpoint something on a map. But to be honest, that doesn't help too much a lot of times, because what do you do then? Yeah, then you have a red pin in North Korea, and what are you doing then afterwards? So that's maybe not the main question. What companies should be aware of is the ways and the kind of attacks, such adversaries, if we talk about nation state or cyber terrorism, what are they doing, what are their capabilities, and am I a possible attack? If I'm an Austrian company and I'm producing machines or whatever in China, for example, there's the potential to be a possible target for industrial espionage, for example, and I should cope with that problem some kind of way.
Yeah. Christian, if we talk about a bank, how much reaction time do you actually have when an attack comes up? Do you get a pre-warning from CRE or from someone else, or do you have an IT department that gives you a pre-warning that you see attack is coming up? How many minutes would you have to react on something like this?
Okay, I wouldn't say really minutes. We have some intelligence services and we are quite okay with them, so we are appreciating all of these kind of preventive actions because they are really helping us, and it's helping in the way that we manage to close some of the entry points from the beginning, so we just minimize the possible entry points. In the rest, we are relying on systems that we have, and in terms of timing, it really, not minutes, but I would say that not more than half an hour to quickly react. So to know that it's happening something and to move forward.
We had a very interesting discussion yesterday with Gernot Kohlhoek about how does an attack come up, when do you hear about it, when do you see about it. You prepared a few slides for us. Maybe we could get the slides on the screens, and you can give us an idea of how in Austria we had certain attacks. You chose certain attacks. How in Austria did it actually happen in terms of the time frame that you have for reaction time for them?
So I have one example from Austria here, also to show you, coming mainly, I'm sure, from companies, what state authorities here, as an example, in Austria can do for you. It's just a timeline. It was 3 attack waves in Austria, which came up last year in September, and it were performed by the ANT group. That's a kind of a Turkish patriotic hacker group, or however you want to call them. And the initial problem was that the British Airways flight had an emergency landing in Schwechat at the Viennese airport, and there were Turkish citizens on this airplane, and there were problems with their entry to Austria. No big problems, there were just some administrative problems. And this group said, yeah, this is bad behavior against Turkish citizens, and started DDoSing the website of the Vienna airport. No rocket science hacks, but very powerful DDoS as a service, in fact. They started DDoSing this website. The same they did for the Austrian National Bank. There was a press talk with Turkey as a topic in these press talks. They didn't like something which was said in those press talks, and they immediately started attacking the website of the Austrian National Bank. The same we had with the candidate of the Austrian presidential election, and so forth. We saw those attacks, and we cooperated with these types of critical infrastructure ministries and analyzed it on a technical level, and wrote a DDoS warning also with IOCs and so on for all the other critical infrastructures which might be attacked by this group. Then it was silent sometime, and in November they did it again. So it was the Austrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the Austrian Defense Ministry, and several other incidents I'm not allowed to talk about, they're not disclosed. So the information you see there is public information, it was in the media too. Yes. What was our reaction on that? We could see those attacks coming, To be honest, it was not a very long period before the attacks happened, but a short time before the attacks happened, we could warn those ministries, those critical infrastructure companies, and when the attacks started, we immediately could inform the operators, watch out, the attacks are coming with these technical details, with these IOCs, with these characteristics, and so forth. Then there was a third wave coming up, and here, I'm not telling you the story why, it's always the same story, something came out of Turkey, and they started attacking the Austrian Parliament website, again, the website of the Foreign Ministry, and so forth. And what we could accomplish here is that we could see those explicit threats on the internet, on public and channels, and we could warn those critical infrastructures, those ministries, way before the attacks happened. So they knew in a certain time frame attacks will be happening with this technical information, and so we could reduce damage and downtime drastically with this example. Just to show you what we are doing on a state level to help critical infrastructures, to help companies, to help other ministries to cope or to prepare on explicit threats and attacks. Maybe just one side note, what the state authorities can never do is be your SOC, be your Security Operations Center. It's not our duty, and to be honest, you also don't have 300 cyber cops sitting somewhere and the personnel to do it. So imagine it like if someone breaks into your apartment and you call the police will for sure not clean up your apartment, put in an alarm system for future attacks and whatnot. They will try to find the bad guy and try to take this information to cope with future robberies or future kind of attacks.
All right, so we see that by working on it, you actually get the chance to pre-warn the infrastructure providers, but also the companies. So we can do something beforehand. This is always based on the assumption that we have certain business processes which are the same, business processes in e-banking or whatever it is, a way to communicate with the customer, a way of information that is out there, and a way of where the data is in the background. But what happens if you actually, Gerald, if you look into changing business processes, you're redesigning business processes right now. What happens if you do that, and can you give us an example of a business process that you would change?
Yes, I'm here to share with you my experience from the insurance industry. So as long as this industry remains for a long period somehow in the shadow of the banking system, they have now to reveal their true face, and they have to show to the customers that policy insurance is not only a paper. Actually, it's a paper until you have a problem, the issue, and you have to be in front of the insurance officer and said, hello, I have a claim here, and I need support from you. So from this perspective, the whole process of claims design was a huge challenge for our company. So we have to somehow differentiate the customers, because obviously there are some very good customers which have very good behavior and they have to receive a very good offer in this respect. And we have customers which are not paying so much attention to their goods. So we have to, let's say, have a kind of profile of them and make some customized offer. In order to have to be prepared to offer customized products, we have to have somehow an entire infrastructure behind, which calculates and which providing us enough information, accurate information, in order to take some right decisions. If you are talking about Internet of Things, different sensors which are present on the cars, and if you are talking about smart homes, which are able to provide also enough information, we have to somehow deal with this huge amount of information, and to extract from this amount of information only the information which is reliable to us. So starting from this perspective of designing this, let's say, claims process, we arrived also in front of an IT security challenge, We have also GDPR as a huge challenge this year and the next year. And we have somehow to redesign also the process from this perspective, including in this process some IT security requirements, which will be hopefully so useful for us in order to not take the wrong decision based on good data. So once again, we will have to remodulate our business process, but keep in mind that the information is a lot of information in our hands and should be somehow very well treated, stored, processed, and let's take good decisions based on that information.
So if you have the information out there, the way that the information is being either put into your system or is given out of your system is being changed as well with the customer, for instance, using his own device, his own mobile phone, his own iPad or whatever, to input data. This opens up new issues. When you design such a process, is the focus of the IT engineer, is the focus on more or less the application itself, on the programming of everything, or do they have a clear focus on IT security when they start up to develop such an application?
Actually, we are starting from it's a very well known word here, customer centricity. We are thinking about customer centricity only from the data perspective. Customer for me is amount of data. It's confidential data, and I have to be I have to pay a lot of attention in dealing with this data. Or from this perspective, I have to give a right input when we design process in order to have proper leverages to deal with this data safely. This is my goal. We have a lot of data. Definitely, all this data is not processed in my infrastructure. I have cloud services, which is also a huge challenge. So my goal is to keep this data safe, and I have to take good decision based on this data.
So if we talk about data and keeping data safe, I couldn't think about any other sector but banking where it's more important to protect the data. When you design an e-banking system, when you think about it, what the process is going to be like, what is in the front end, what is the focus on IT security there? Is it a major issue or is it just something that comes with it when one designs the applications?
Actually, it's a major issue from the beginning, and we are involved from the beginning in all the developments that are taking place at one time related to whatever system we are implementing, either it's internet banking, mobile banking, or regular system from the bank. So, regardless if it's how should I say, directly exposed to the client or it's an internal one, we are focusing on the same level of interest from security point of view to all of them, and we are involved from the beginning.
Yep.
It's not perfect, but we are there from the beginning.
Gabriel, as having an advisory package, would you confirm that? Would you say companies come to you and they ask you right away, if you design something, can you test the IT security that we have behind it from the very beginning, or is it only something that happens a bit later in the process?
So we have both situations. We have companies which are coming and involving us in testing the solution they are developing from the beginning. We had cases where we had to test systems because of the specific requirements from the regulation, and they were surprised about the results. And just to give an example, in one test in insurance testing, we could obtain access to pretty much all type of information, including health information, because that company was selling also life insurance, and we could see the results of medical tests and even some diagnosis. So pretty scary. Just to know a simple example that someone has an allergy to some food or something, and imagine what you can do with that information if the guy is not your friend.
So if we talk about the information that is in the background, we talked about insurances, you talked about healthcare services, we talked about banking. Has there been any regulation being enforced already right now, Adriana? Or is the regulation coming up in the future? Or which regulation is coming up to protect the data?
Actually, we have regulation right now because data, if we talk about data protection, there's a European-wide regulation. This is a directive mainly, but this will be replaced, as we all know, starting from next year. So there is regulation right now. In the future, though, we will have a more strict regulation, so the burden of the companies will be higher in terms of compliance efforts, but it's not something completely new. The GDPR incorporates a lot of jurisprudence from the European Court of Justice, a lot of guidelines issued by the data protection authorities. So I think there are very, very few things that are completely new in the GDPR. Most of the things we knew about them, it's just that now they are codified in a regulation and they are stricter from certain perspectives, and of course there are higher penalties than there are today.
So what is your experience in terms of companies that talk to you about GDPR, about the regulation that is going to come into force next year in May? What is your experience? Are companies still hesitant to talk to you about it, or do they talk to the lawyer at the very first beginning already when it comes up the topic?
I think they start with the lawyers, because for most of our clients this is a process driven from a legal and compliance perspective, of course with the necessary IT support, but they start from the regulation. And then they develop and they look at the IT part and see how they can incorporate it in this compliance effort, which for some of our clients is really huge.
Yeah. So you actually have a data privacy or data protection officer that you have to install based on GDPR. What is the status right now in the companies, in the bank, in BCV for instance, Christian, do you already have a data protection officer? Do you have a data privacy officer?
We do have a data protection officer for starting this year basically, and it's deeply involved. He basically is deeply involved in implementation of GDPR regulation until May next year, and also will be directly involved in all of the requirements that are coming with these regulations as the law basically.
So it's getting more or less a central function in risk management.
In our case, it's a central function in risk management. It will be part of the second line of defense of the bank. We have three lines of defense models inside the bank, and it will be part of the second line of defense. It will be part of risk, and should be there.
Adriana, are the companies more interested in how to implement GDPR, or are the companies more interested into the penalties, because there's quite stiff penalties behind it? Are the companies, so to say, scared, or are they really trying to increase their data protection?
I think it's both. I think on the one side, the level of fine is quite scary for everyone, but it's not only this. I think there are a lot of companies that see this as an opportunity to be in touch with their clients, to offer them more control on their data, more security, and possibly gain a competitive advantage from this perspective. So I think there are both sides of the story involved.
Yeah. Gerald, we talked about it yesterday, about the data protection officer and about the penalties. Do you think the focus should be on the penalties, just to make the companies aware about it?
From my perspective, the fines are the trigger. Unfortunately, it's not normal, because we are talking about regulation which has in scope the data protection for all European citizens. But the reality says that the fines are the trigger, unfortunately, and based on those fines, we have to do something, and we have to have enough resources to be prepared for the next year. And you asked before if we have a data protection officer. I have to be honest with you, we don't have a data protection officer for the moment, mainly due to the fact that this profile is not so clear for the moment. It seems to be a kind of combination between Superman and kind of Bruce Lee. And we haven't found the proper person for the moment. There are a lot of discussion surrounding future character within our company. Our company is a little bit smaller than the BCR, and I think that a good position for a DPO is within the compliance, probably. And we are firstly focusing on, let's say, the gap analysis and to see exactly where we are today. And after that, hopefully we'll take proper decision in order to have a good compliance check it.